Hey there, everybody. Parkes Ousley here with Invent Global, and this is Esports Weekly. I think we're on episode 6 right now, and I'm joined by Nick D'Orazio. Thank you
Episode
so
6?
much. Yeah, I think it's episode 6.
I'm so proud.
Oh, thank you.
What are we going to do for episode 10?
For episode 10, I don't know. That's. I have 4 weeks. I have 1 month. I'll have to figure it
Okay,
out.
1 month to plan something huge.
Maybe by then I can have someone in person. Probably not though.
Oh, I know,
Probably
right?
not though. But
Maybe.
Nick, I always start these off by
Yeah.
asking my guests what they have done in the coronavirus times, other than work, other than whatever. Have you picked up any new hobbies? Have you figured out how to cook a dish?
I painted.
Oh,
So me and my wife paint. Those are some of the paintings in the background. We started to grow plants. That's fun. So we have plants. Overall, I've been cooking more. That's nice.
yeah.
And you know what? It's interesting. I've realized that I am secretly the most amazing chef ever. I don't know how. I never knew this about myself, but I have an intuitive skill. Or I just use a lot of butter and salt, so everything's delicious.
The butter and
But
salt really helps.
yeah, it does. But so I've been having fun with that. For me, actually, I got married during the quarantine. So where I'm sitting right now is where my wedding took place. I had an officiant, a photographer, and then my wife. So my entire quarantine has been the trying to adapt to that, trying to become a husband and trying to adapt to what it's like. Because it's very different from having a roommate, living with a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a partner. It's very different when they become your official spouse, because all of a sudden your lives are like intertwined in a way that, like, oh, wait a minute, I need to have like a schedule for my day, because I can't just do whatever I want because someone is so linked.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's what my coronavirus has been.
that sounds
That
really
and
tough.
IGC, our
Yeah.
esports conference.
Yeah, which I want to talk about that first. I know we have a few different things that we'll talk about.
Yeah,
But as this is Esports Weekly and we just did a bunch of awesome panels on esports, I figured
we
they're
did.
pretty relevant.
We
Um,
did.
so why don't we run through just a couple of them, maybe some of your favorites, some of the maybe the cool points that got
Yeah,
brought up that maybe you weren't expecting, or maybe you just think they're very relevant and need to be talked
for
about a little
sure.
more.
Well, first, for those who don't know, IGC is the Invent Global Esports Conference. We started this in 2018, and we've done it every year since. This is obviously our first virtual conference. We had to do everything online. But the reason we even started the event is because our CEO started going to other esports events when he first came to this country to kind of start Invent Global, and he was disappointed because they were all very surface level esports talks. Like, no one was really talking about the nitty gritty, the real problems that face this industry. So fast forward to 2020, and I feel as if every single panel was doing just that. I mean, I'm actually really proud of the panels we put on, because we just weren't pulling any punches. We had one panel that questioned whether or not investment in the space was actually hurting esports, which I actually loved. It was a real frank conversation from Raynad. Shout outs to him. He's always has a really hot fire take. But, there's a lot of authenticity that goes away when there's a bunch of investor dollars. There's a lot of power that leaves the pro players, leaves the teams, and leaves the tournament organizers when we're beholden to these developers. At the same time, we also had panels about how esports needs to make money, and we have huge revenue issues. One of, I think, maybe the spiciest things we talked about was questioning whether or not esports is even an industry. This concept of esports really just being a thin layer of marketing on top of the game industry. And if you look at some of the most successful esports, how do we even define success in that? Is it success when you sell a bunch of games, or is it success when you create a legendary player that you can then sell product from? You can then, sell jerseys, things like that. One of the, and I guess, God, man, Parks, you really opened up on Pandora's box asking me about IGC. But the last thing I'll say before I kind of move on to more things is, someone said and this was Lee Amassi on a panel about esports revenue. He said esports is currently 1936 baseball, and I love that quote. It's been in my head because we are always thinking that we're like, this is it, esports is hitting the big time. But if you look at the numbers, no, we haven't. If you look at the revenue, no, we haven't. If you look at compared to the games industry or Hollywood or any other entertainment industry, we're not even close. So yeah, maybe this is 1936 baseball. Maybe this is the very, very formative years of what will eventually be a much larger ecosystem with much more strict rules and leagues and lawyers and this entire ecosystem around agents and branding. And you're going to see esports people on cereal boxes, and like that's a very, very real thing. So obviously I've been thinking pretty much nonstop ever since IGC. There's a lot of work to be done, and I won't spill into our next topic, but it is very co-entwined. So yeah, Parkes, how did you enjoy IGC, man?
I enjoyed it a lot. It was my first one. Last year, actually, I had been freelancing for you guys.
Yep.
And then IGEC, I was really excited because I was going to go to it, but it actually ended up, my plans changed quite a bit. I moved out of the country.
Oh yeah, you went to China.
Yeah. So I was actually really upset last year. And the first one that you did was when I was in Germany for MSI.
Oh yeah.
So I found out about that and was like, oh, I'm out of the country, but this sounds awesome. I can't wait to go. Then next year, I'm out of the country again. Now this year, I'm stuck at home. So that sucked. But it was really cool to be a part of it. I got to talk to someone who's way above my pay grade and knowledge grade and whatever. So that was really cool.
I think if there's one thing we've learned in the past week is that no one is above anyone currently in esports.
I mean, that's very fair. And I guess that is the nature of my job, is I interview people who are above me or whatever, because they're interesting. But that was, it was a cool opportunity to get to talk to a bunch of people that otherwise I would never have talked to.
So yeah, that's definitely the word to focus on. Otherwise, you would not have talked to. So that's the whole point of IGC, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a networking event. We're trying to bring people in esports together. It's very easy to feel as if esports is like a very tiny bubble, and there's your FPS crowd over there, and there's your fighting crowd over there, and then there's all these little tiny pockets of like, oh, here's tier 1 esports, tier 2, tier 3, and all it does is hurt the scene. All it does is hurt everyone when people aren't getting together and talking. One of, I think, I'm very happy that I got so much positive feedback. A lot of people were saying this was amazing. I was able to network more than I've ever done. I've learned so much. But what was also really interesting was the amount of people who have been interested in esports, but they're come from completely like non-endemic businesses. I'm talking about hardware people. I'm talking about product managers who, for headphones. There was one guy who was a restaurateur that was there, and he was just learning about it because, like, sure, why not, right? Why not learn about this industry that has a very, very high chance of activating all of these young consumers? So in the long run, I think that's where us esports natives benefit the most. It's actually when we network with people outside of esports, because they're able to look at the space with fresh eyes. They're able to look at the things we do and then challenge them. Oh, well, why are you even doing it like that? Or haven't you ever thought about doing like this? I mean, at the very, very basic minimum, you can go to some of the leagues and some of these in-person events when we used to have them. And the food there was awful. And I'm talking to this restaurateur, and he's like, yeah, we could get so much good food in there. We could bring so much, and stuff like that, right? Those are the type of conversations that you don't have unless you bring everyone together. So those are some of the upsides of having this event and it being virtual, I guess.
And I kind of liken that to having an editor personally. If I have an editor, it's an outside, pair of eyes.
Yes,
and
it is.
I don't have to look at a piece and try and, well, maybe I didn't share all the context. It's all in my head, and I just don't realize that I didn't actually give it to the reader.
Yeah.
But if I have an editor, he doesn't have that context, and he can tell me, hey, from the outside, this is how this presents.
I'm going to go full hog on this writing metaphor, because I was just recently reading about this author was saying how most problems in writing are structural problems. Like if you take a writer who knows what they're doing and there's like, I'm stuck or this is bad, it's almost always because the structure is wrong. Really, the best editor is one that moves the sentences around and moves the paragraphs around, because an idea and an article is very much like a film. It has to have your beginning and your middles and your rising and then that call to action. Like that's what a really, really good article does. And I was going, oh my God, I was going to liken this back to, yes. So structural problems, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to someone at IGC, and these guys do real big like EDM concerts, like some of the biggest music events ever. Like like at first I was like, okay, no, but I saw these people's pedigree. Okay, these are real producers. They were talking about some of these massive events, thousands and thousands of people, extremely famous artists, and they came to this event to learn about esports, right? And one of the things that they were talking to me about, he's like, I've heard from my son that he goes to these esports events and they're like 7 hours long and there's no party afterwards and the kids are bored. And sometimes when the matches aren't fun, there's like nothing to do. And it struck me because he was talking about a structural problem in the way that we produce this events. From his outside perspective, he's like, oh my God, if you get thousands of kids in a room, I can make it the most fun thing in the world. Like there's so many things we're not doing with the bodies, even in the spaces. There's so many little things you can do to make it fun. There's so many ways in which you can bring in sponsors so then they can help the after party and help the fun things. So even then, I think so much of the structure of esports isn't questioned. So much of the way that we structure these events, that we structure these teams, that we structure pretty much everything around esports are so rarely questioned because we barely bring in outside voices. I think the biggest problem within esports is you have this kind of like upper crust of old guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the old guard, the only reason why they still have jobs is because they constantly convince everyone that, trust me, I know. Like, oh, trust me, you need me to make this event good, or you need my advice or my consultantship to make this event the best. And it's like, well, do we? Like, really? Like, because you are from esports 10 years ago. Like, you were doing this when it was way smaller. And the outside people are looking at this and trying to blow it up. Like, for example, me and anyone else who have been doing esports for like 10 plus years could have never, ever thought of the idea of like, what Epic is doing with their concerts and what Epic did with Marshmello and what Epic did with Travis Scott. In fact, when a Fortnite started to mix esports and entertainment, all of us were mocking it. All of us were like, oh, look at that. That's so dumb. That's not real esports. Look how lame it is. And yet, Epic is absolutely crushing it. Epic is absolutely paving a new way forward. They're absolutely advancing the space, and they're the ones getting the music industry. I'm interested. They're the ones getting the major brands and artists interested. So the more I produce these events, the more I realize how vital it is to not focus on inviting all of the old guard of esports exhaustively. You need to invite literally anyone else who has an interest in esports, because I truly do think that's how you get esports to be more than just that thin crust of a marketing experiment to sell Overwatch or to sell League of Legends,
Yeah. No, you said a lot there. I agree. I think it's very interesting.
Man, you opened up Pandora's box asking me about IGC. This is my baby. I love this event. I produced it 3 years now. I've hosted it 3 years now. I wonder when I will pass the reins over to someone else. One day.
Maybe when you don't feel this strongly about it.
That's never going to happen.
Well,
but
then,
yeah, maybe.
Then you're stuck. But yeah, I think it was a great event. It was really cool seeing. We had a bunch of different topics. I learned a lot, and it's cool that obviously that's not the only thing. The panels aren't the only thing. The networking was huge.
Well, there is one topic we didn't talk about, and it's because it happened, I don't know, the day after IGC. I mean,
Yeah.
Parks, are we
So
ready to talk
this
about
is
the elephant in the room?
yeah this the you said something earlier about one of the panels was talking about the how do we move forward, how do we make it
Yep.
better, how do we make it
Yep.
more legitimate, more structured, and one of the things you mentioned was we need more rules, and
Yes. We need more
that
rules.
is very very telling right now. We've
Mhm.
had obviously Nick and I are talking about the current climate of esports right now, which is a Me Too
Rampant
movement.
sexual abuse and grooming
Yeah,
and rape within esports and gaming. I
it's
mean,
really bad.
it's terrible and it's terrifying. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not surprising. And I
Yeah,
think that last part is the thing that makes me the most sad. Yeah, Parks.
yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I think
Yeah.
if you ever read an accusation and go, "Oh yeah, I see that," why do you see
Yeah.
that? Why are there
Well,
so many times when over the last 2 weeks you read something and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. We should
so
never have someone be in a position of power where it makes sense that they might sexually assault someone.
so I would love to try to answer that because first of all, I think it's way too simple and easy of a brush to say, oh, well, all of those people are just evil. So we just have to get not evil people and then everything goes away.
Hmm.
And I think that's wrong. And I think it's well intended, but it's very foolish. You should just read any history book. Read any history book about the Nazi Party, or read any history book about what happens when cultures are formed and systems of power are created and then they're not questioned. The reason I truly believe all of this exploded within esports is because of an assumption. We made an assumption that the people in power were using that power correctly and were wielding that power in a way that benefited esports. And we made that assumption because it was the assumption we all wanted, and to be quite frank, the assumption we all needed. We needed to believe that all of these casters and pro players and tournament organizers, over the course of 5 years, they exploded in clout and popularity within our scene, be it their social medias, their Twitch. We needed to assume for any of this to work that they're just all right. I guess they're just all good, positive people. I guess the reason they all got this power and clout is because they're good and fair. And unfortunately, the people who were a little less trusting, I would say these are the bell ringers in our society, the ones who were very early on accusing these people. They they weren't believed. They were criticized, and they were stamped out because the implications, if it were true, were to be so damaging to so many. Now, right now, the most recent kind of explosion is within the Smash Brothers community and in the fighting community, and I want to talk about that later because there's a lot to talk about. But this whole started with Dota. This all started with Dota 2, and you can even go back and say, well, it really started with Chris D'Elia, and it's kind of there's this science behind these Me Too movements. It starts with someone huge, massive, bigger than life, who you thought could never be canceled, someone like a Harvey Weinstein, and in this case, it was the massively popular comedian Chris D'Elia. And what it does is when the one big leg topples, people start having more courage and realizing, well, hey, listen, if Chris D'Elia can get toppled, well, then so can my abuser, who's not even close to being that famous, right? So can my abuser, right? But what happened with Dota, I think, is something that is much more, I hate to use the word mundane, but a lot of this stems from people wanting to keep their jobs. A lot of this stems from cowardice of people being afraid to call out their boss or being afraid to call out the most powerful person in the room.
Hmm.
I've heard a lot of on Twitter people say absolute power corrupts absolutely, like and all that. And I'd say to some extent that's true. A lot of this can be blamed, I think, to the cowardice of all of the people who works with them. At the end of the day, I truly, truly believe that these type of things would have been stamped out so much earlier if the people who work in esports, even if you're just a camera operator, even if you're just someone who, writes whatever, or even if you're just someone who works around these big, like cult of personality types, we need to start making the culture and the precedent very obvious that, one, your career will not be in jeopardy if you speak out. Because I've read all of these stories. I read all of these accusations, and one of the most common threads were these women were afraid that their careers would be in jeopardy. These were women who worked in esports or worked in the game industry, and they truly believed that if I said something, I'd be punished. And you know what? They were right. That is correct. So number one, I think that's what we have to change. We have to change this myth, and I think it starts with all of the men who also work in the industry, right? It starts with the men who, don't have, hundreds of thousands of followers, but it starts with the people who are the staff, who are the people that work. We need to start making it very, very clear that, people don't get punished for this. So moving on to Smash Brothers. And I think Smash Brothers is different than what happened with Dota, because I truly do think Dota and those, it's about corporate power structures. No one wanted to lose their job. No one wanted to, get someone fired. In Smash, there aren't those like power structures. There's no big, Smash company. No one's sitting there worried about losing their funding for the Smash tournament. It's just very different. I'm going to pull from my experience within the cosplay scene. And when I used to work with cosplayers and when I used to work at conventions, there was a time when I traveled to at least maybe 15 or 20 conventions a year.
Uh-oh. Did Discord... Oh, one second. Nick, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, hello?
Oh, whoops.
Yes, I can hear you.
Discord died for a second there.
It did die, but are we?
No, yeah, we're all good. The last thing that we all got to hear from you was you traveled to 15 to 20 things a year.
So long story short, I have a lot of experience in the convention scene and with cosplayers, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody knew that there were creepies, that there were creeper guys, that there were pedophiles, that they were sexual abusers, that they were groomers in these anime conventions. Everyone knew it. You couldn't stop it. I mean, at the end of the day, you're creating environments in which 13 to 18 or young people are also sharing the same space with like 30-year-old men, 40-year-old men, right? And all of the stereotypes are true. Like, they bought their ticket. They have just a right to be there, but it's suspect. It's suspect. It's especially suspect when all the young kids are having fun. I'm dressing up like cosplayers and all their anime characters. Then you have these, like adult men wanting to pose with them. Like, we've all heard stories. Now, the thing about the cosplay scene, though, is that it's dominated by women. All of the most powerful people in cosplay are women. And when women are your kind of central figures, it becomes so much easier to call out these abusers. It becomes that becomes part of the culture. Now, I'm not going to say that the cosplay and the convention scene is like free of this, but I will say that there are steps in place. Like, it's so much harder to be a predator in those scenes because women support other women, and powerful women don't feel endangered. And these powerful cosplayers with millions of followers and these huge things, they will call you out. They will call you out immediately. Now, I think what happened with Smash, it's almost the exact same scene. It's the same type of people. It's young kids. It's the anime style parties. It's these hotel after parties. God, don't even get me started about Sky's Twitch house. Turns out, like, how much horrible shit was going down there. But I think a lot of why it happened is because there were so little women at these events that were in positions of power or authority. There were so few women who were able to, speak up for those with less power. What we had instead was a bunch of men. It was a bunch of men who, I don't want to try to support the narrative that, they're just awkward virgins or they're so-and-so. But I will say it does have to do with the fact that a lot of these guys have very little experience with trying to date, with trying to navigate these waters. I think a lot of these Smash Brothers, people, let's be real, their only discernible life skills and experience is being very good at Smash Brothers. You then give that person all of this power and clout, and you give them fanboys and fangirls who are younger than them, and it corrupted them. I truly do think that. I don't think these are evil people, but I think these are people who were corrupted by the power they were given. They were corrupted by the culture in place. I think Sky has a lot to discuss. And I think Sky is ultimately responsible for a lot of these things by hosting these parties, by hosting these things. Because at the end of the day, this culture of inviting underage kids to parties with alcohol, this culture of making it okay for these people to enter tournaments with 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds, like as teammates. That would be often they do doubles, but just, man, such a despicable fact of this grooming is the fact that they would literally be playing together and they would be exchanging, oh, I'll help you get good at the game. And it's just really, really, listen, I'm ranting right now, but what I'm trying to say is that how to stop this from happening is we need to start calling out the cultures for what they are, right? Competitive gaming is not a party scene. It should never be a party scene. Competitive gaming shouldn't include after parties after the tournament that are filled with drugs and alcohol and young kids and minors, right? I think where Smash Brothers lost their way is it became more about the popular casters and celebrities within the scene and less about just the competition. And when that happens, it becomes very, very easy, I think, for this cult of weird partying, grooming, don't ask, don't tell. I mean, I was actually shocked. I was shocked. Part of the downside of IGC is, we had one of these predators on our panels. D1 was on our fighting game panel, and the guy was literally talking about safe leadership. The guy was literally, to our audience, talking about how important it is to have trusted leaders and safe leaders. And in that same breath, the people who claim they're leaders, at the end of the day, they're nothing better than just partiers that abuse their platform and abuse this amazing thing called competitive gaming to have a really, really wild and debauchery type of lifestyle. So I could literally go on about this forever, and I should probably have a point.
1 sec.
But Parkes, what do you think about that whole vomit rant of words that I just said? Because I'm really fired up about this, obviously.
There are a number of things I want to clarify that you said.
Please.
The first is your point about people in the scene being cowardice at times.
Yes.
That I want to make clear. You are talking about people like you and me, people in positions, not victims. You're talking about people who are watching actions as a third party, as a potential mediator, as a potential person to speak up, who is otherwise unaffected. These are the people.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, not in any way, shape, or form the victims.
Yeah.
The victims don't speak out because they know the stakes and they will get punished. They will get blacklisted. They have the deck stacked against them. Yeah. It is the cowardice of all of the supposed friends and allies around these victims that don't help stack the deck in their favor. As in, the moment you see something, you need to say something.
On top of that, I think it's also the weird idolization that a lot of these members have. And this is something that it makes a lot of sense. Like, if you like watching American football, then you have your favorite American football players. It's the same for esports. It's the same for the casters. These casters are personalities. They're funny. There's a reason why they have their job. It makes sense that you like them. However, Nick D'Orazio, actually, another Envin Global reporter, tweeted out something about, like, kill your idols. Like, don't worship these people. Like, they are people, and when they do wrong, you will be hurt. And
Yeah.
as we're finding out right now, most of them are doing wrong. And
Yeah.
so we get into this weird situation where we have this respect for someone who maybe we don't even know, and then we get into this like, well, they've been accused and should I believe it, and you're fighting yourself when there really is no
Yeah.
fight to even be had if you don't just blindly give you can enjoy something. Like, I enjoy playing League of Legends somehow. I don't know how I still do, but I do. But I don't worship the game. Well, maybe. Well, I try not to worship the game.
So here's the thing. Imagine if Faker came up to you and you were so thrilled, and for some reason Faker messaged you and said he really loves your work and he loves the way that you write about League and he really, really respects it. And then he invites you to Korea so you could go to this tournament because he especially wants you to write about it, right? And then imagine the horror and the abject, a nightmare if for some reason Faker started to groom you, Parkes. And I think that is the reality that we have to face about these young fans and these young smashers. I mean, I do love Nick Gracie's point of kill your idols. I think adults should do that. I think adults need to come to grips with the world and be real like that. But esports, and to a huge extent the Smash Brothers scene, it relies on those young kids thinking these pro players are gods, thinking these pro players are larger than life. I mean, all of esports is about thinking these players are larger than life. So we're never going to be able to stop that fandom, you know?
And that connects to another clarification that I have. But before I get to that one,
please.
The second thing you said that I want to clarify is when you're comparing the cosplay scene with the Smash scene, you talk about how the cosplay scene has more female leaders. That's awesome. The Smash scene doesn't. And that might be part of why there's a discrepancy there. I want to make the point that women don't always, like, it's not just on women to protect women. Like, men being leaders shouldn't be a problem. Like, it really shouldn't be, because they should just be better. And
it's true.
Like, obviously we need to have we need to have equality in our leadership. We shouldn't just be like, oh well, men could be better, so make them all leaders. No. But
like, let's be real though.
Places,
this is esports and gaming.
Yeah.
Like, esports and gaming, men have a huge issue with women in esports and gaming. And here's I don't even think this is a hot take. A lot of people think that gamers hate women. That I don't think that's true at all. They're afraid of women. They don't know anything about women. They're terrified of women. They don't understand women at the very core. And I truly do think that fear of women often manifests itself in anger and vitriol, and it often manifests itself in this toxicity, right? So when we talk about gaming and esports, men rising up, I think like these aren't ordinary men. These are men who have an extra layer of fear and dislike of women. So it's even harder, I think, to expect them to say, well, like, the solution is men be allies. Because, to be frank, I don't think we can expect that from the gaming community. I truly don't think we can expect that. I think we can eventually, but if we're talking practical solutions, like how to actually on paper have less people abused by members of our community, have less, I think it needs to be a radical restructure of how tournaments look, how tournaments feel, the pace of tournaments. We need to just start having some clear boundaries. For one, I think talent needs to start acting like talent. If you're working at this event, if you're a pro player that's playing, you need to get rid of this notion that, oh, I'm just showing up to the tournament. No. You're not. You're not just a normal person showing up. So I don't think it's appropriate for you to be lingering with the crowds, and for you to be just interacting with everyone, and you to be going to parties with fans. I just don't think that's appropriate. to go back to my cosplay experience, every single famous cosplayer has handlers, and we do that to create a separation between fan and cosplayer for both parties, their protection. The cosplayer needs to be protected by these fans that are obsessed about them, and in the same form, the fans need to be given a wall, because you can't trust someone who's that young and that obsessed to not put themselves in danger. That's the thing. We're the adults in the room. You don't sit there and invite tons of 15-year-olds to be in the same room as their idol and then say, oh, look, and now there's some alcohol. And you know what? All right, see you later. Have fun at the party. Because now the safety of these kids are put into, all is up to this one influencer, this one caster. And I just feel as if the rest of the adults in the room, this all comes back to what I was saying. There was this assumption we all made. There was an assumption we made that these leaders were safe. There was an assumption that made that it's okay because D1 is a good guy. And here's the thing, listen, I still think D1 is a good guy. I think these people are good people, but they've done horrible things. They've done horrible things. They need to be accountable for those actions. It's way too simple to call them evil. If you call them evil, then this is going to happen again. Because, oh, okay, well, those guys were evil. Here's our new group of influencers. Here's our new group of casters. Oh, guys, and don't worry, these are the good ones. These people aren't going to do anything bad. These people aren't going to be perverted by absolute power, and these people aren't going to be corrupted by fandom. No, that's not how this works. We can't just say, oh, get all of these bad apples out. It's the system we need to change, because at the end of the day, for every 10 people that make it in esports and they have this real desire to do good, right? There's going to be a group of those people who have underlying problems, who have serious issues when it comes to pedophilia or sexual abuse or like whatever. And I'm not going to trust the safety of the fans with, I hope that they figure it out. No. We need to create the barrier between them. That's, I guess, my biggest point, and I guess my long-winded way of saying what I've learned from the cosplay community. The cosplay community quickly learned that the barrier needs to be made, because you can't trust both sides. You can't trust either side. It's like you're constantly creating these toxic environments and then just crossing your fingers. The Sky, a Twitch house, whatever, talk about a toxic-ass environment, all right? The solution to that is not, we'll just put better people in the house. No, don't have a Twitch house that invites underage kids. If these people were all adults, I wouldn't care at all. Do whatever you want. Live in this weird, creepy house and you do whatever you want. You're all just a bunch of adults. But you know what? I never thought I'd be able to say this, but I understand why Nintendo never supported the Smash scene with full force. Because at the end of the day, it's a giant, colossal risk. The Smash community has no checks and balances, no structure, and this was just a ticking time bomb, right? It was a ticking time bomb when after every single one of these events, there's open alcohol and there's this party that everyone wants to get into. It's just, the whole thing is just, it's so systematic. And I guess that's my point. I really want people to focus on the system and focus on the culture and focus on the structure of these tournaments, not the individuals. Because if you focus on the individuals, it's just going to happen again.
Yeah. Another clarification, a bunch. Yeah, man, I need to start just writing. I need to start writing while you're talking.
I need these clarifications because, you know what? There's a lot of ways you can take what I'm saying out of context, I guess. So thank you for trying to help me out, Parkes.
Yeah, of course. I think first off, just, what you're saying about people rising to power and being corrupted by that, etc., is also very relevant outside of esports, just in the current political and, I don't know, racial injustice climate of America right now, with police brutality. I mean, it's like it's like a mirror image of these people who, I don't know, find themselves in this position of power, whether or not it's deserved or whatever,
Yeah.
they have it and abuse it.
Yeah. I
And
mean, people need to look inward, you know? People need to like, if you were to look inward and look at all the bad things you've done, look at all the things you've done that are so morally reprehensible. Oh God, I can't believe I did that. I was so stupid. I can't believe I hurt that person. I can't believe, right? That's just you. That's you in your little non-power. You don't have any, you're just like a normal person.
thanks for
You
the
need to
humility.
magnify that. You need to magnify the normalcy and the mundaneness of your own human like imperfection, and all of a sudden you amplify it by like 1,000.
Mhm.
Because what if you had power? What if no one could approach you? What if you literally had no one that could call you out? That's what we saw in these pockets of esports royalty. And I say royalty with the heaviest, most sarcastic, like quotes possible, but
Finger
that is
quotes.
really the best way to describe it, because these were the people who we trusted to like represent our industry. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel as if I really want, anyways, I'm going to stop ranting. Parks, please.
The next kind of, I don't know, response that I have, I don't really like generalizing people.
Yeah.
And I think you made a really good point about, man, trying to go through all the points.
Was I talking?
I
Is it when I was generalizing about how
it
most men in esports and gaming are afraid of
Yeah,
women, and it
yeah.
turns into,
I think on the back half of that, you made a good point about the. I'm drawing blank. I'm like
don't worry.
while I'm for, but yeah, that generalization I think is kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
Oh, it was about the men being evil. Like, oh, they're just evil, but now we have
Yeah.
new ones. That's a great point because
Yeah.
it avoids the root of the problem. I think the same thing could be said about, oh, gamers just don't know how to talk to girls, because one,
Yeah.
that assumes that girls aren't playing games, which is incorrect, and I
Yeah.
think that's harmful. But also, like, there are people who know how to talk to women who also know how to talk to other,
Yeah.
like, it's not just a talking to women thing. It's
Yeah.
it's a respect
So let's
issue in
clarify.
general.
Yeah.
It's a toxicity issue in general. It's a not being held accountable in general. It's just a societal problem, and
Yeah.
I think whether or not they know how to talk to someone doesn't excuse this type of behavior.
Of course. So let's
Um,
definitely go into like the nuance of this, because first of all, most of these groomers, no, they have the opposite problem. They do know how to
yeah,
talk to people. They do know how to use their words. My point wasn't that, oh, look, they're just so awkward and they can't talk to women, but it's what you clarified. Their lack of understanding of women makes them objectify them, or
mhm.
it causes them to dehumanize them. It causes them to then, in their mind, rationalize this behavior. One of the things that I think was one of the most disgusting parts about the Smash Brothers sexual assaults that I was reading was there was a culture of bringing in these young women, and then I'm treating them as disposable playthings that were then passed around amongst this group. Like, it just feels dirty to say that, but that's what happened. And whenever these gross human injustices happen, there's a tendency to just be so shocked and appalled that, again, we say, well, they must be evil. But I think, again, like we're saying, that simplifies it. How do you treat a young woman that poorly and disrespect her that much? And how do you do that? Well, I think it starts because you have dehumanized her. You've, in your mind, you have made her lesser, and you're able to now treat her worse. And I think gamers and gaming culture so often tries to make women lesser, be it by saying that they're worse at the game, or be it by having this this stigma that women should only play support classes, or this whole thing about mercy mains. All of it has a central core to it, and the central core is that women are lesser, and it's why men who, under the anonymity of these voice protocols over games, overwhelmingly flame women, not for their gameplay, but for being a woman, right? So when you look and you really try to unpeel the layers, how did this happen? Try to understand how it happened. Not it's so bad it happened, because we all know it's so bad it happened, but understand how it happened. Well, I really do think it starts with there's a culture in gaming that views women as less. So if you even go back to that, well, how do you change that? Well, I think it starts with the cowardice that we were talking about before. It's the cowardice of the men that know better. It's the cowardice of the men that do understand that women are humans, that don't have the natural tendency to put women as less. It is the cowardice of those men to not say anything when they're in the voice chat, when they're at the party, when they're at the tournament, when they're seeing it happen, when they're in the group chat hearing some guy brag about how he just disrespected this woman. It's the cowardice of those men. Because, and again, in the worst way, I hate that I have to say this, but if you're trying to change the hearts and minds of those toxic men that view women less, well, the most practical way is for a man to talk to them, right? Now, I'm not saying that that's perfect, that that's good, that that's something that is right with the world, but I don't really care about trying to make it nice and flowery. I care about a practical solution to make this happen less. And I think it starts with men. I think it starts with the men who have seen it and thought, well, I'm not that guy because I don't do it, or I'm not bad because, you know what, I saw this party was crazy, so I just walked away. Unfortunately, what's his name? He's a very remarkable a Smash commentator. He's a Coney. So Coney was having a very, very emotional and public live streams after this happened, because, you know, I don't even know what it's like to be in his situation. These are all of his best friends. These are legit all of his best friends. He's been climbing up this whole esports thing with them for like the past 15 years, right? Coney is in tears on his stream. And what does he feel? He feels guilt, because he says, you know, I never partied. I don't really drink. He has a wife. He has a kid. He's on a whole different level of life than these. He's not going to these parties, but he feels guilt. Why? Because not going to the party wasn't enough. Just being the good guy in Smash wasn't enough. You have people like Viscount and Hugs and Coney. I believe these are the good guys. You have women praising their allyship all over Twitter. But I do think that they should feel guilty. It hurt to see Coney express that guilt, but he should feel guilty, because it's not enough to just be a good guy. Mm-hmm. Why weren't you talking to D1 and Kitaro? Why weren't you saying, hey man, why are you going to those parties? Or what are you doing? Or like, have you heard about these rumors? Why weren't you going and really, really trying to, you know, live out what you believe? And I know that's easier said than done, but it's what needs to happen.
Yeah. I actually posted about that on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah.
About like,
really,
if you were reading these accusations and you're like, wow, that's terrible. Wow, that's terrible. Wow, I don't do this. I'm so good. No, you're not good. If you are not out here like harassing people, you're normal. Like, you're just a human. You're just not bad. You're just living. And like,
I'm glad earlier you brought up how this has very similar connections to the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think that's true, because one of the takeaways that people are learning is it's not enough to be not racist. You need to be anti-racist. Yeah. It's the same thing with this. It's not enough to be not a misogynist gamer asshole. You need to be anti-misogynist gamer asshole. Yeah. No pun intended, because it turns out anti the Smash player was also a misogynist gamer asshole, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, love that. Yeah.
I want to go back and make one more point on something you were talking about, but then I want to talk about looking forward, and then we can wrap it up. You mentioned you were talking with someone, I think in the music industry, during these panels about what are they doing? They're just watching games, and
Yeah,
there's no
it's
fun and entertainment. And you were like, yeah, he said, why isn't there a party after? But
yeah.
then you go over here and you're like, why are there parties after?
So,
So
so
what's
yeah. So here's the thing: people want to party. I'm not trying to like. It's completely naive to try to say, "Oh, hey, let's just no alcohol, no any of that, no any of that." I don't think that works, and I think I know it doesn't work because I've been in this convention scene for so long, right? But what I do know works is you have parties that are sponsored by actual companies with security in public places, like they're an actual party that check IDs, that wristband people, that say you can't drink because this. That is a party. That is a party that people produce. That is a party. If you're going to party at these events, that's what it has to be. Not at Sky's house or some hotel suite, right? There is a need for fun. There is a need for this like celebratory things, but the other industries have figured that out. And listen, it's definitely more complicated because esports involves kids, right? That's just the fact of the matter, right? I'm not going to try to pretend that there isn't horrible, sexual assaults that go on at EDM events or go on at music industry events, right? But those are all a lot less important right now because our events involve kids. Our events are and not only does our events involve kids, but we advertise to kids. We use a video game designed for kids, made for kids, involving kids characters, and say, "Come on and join us." It's like the worst. It just makes me gross to even think about it. Like we're literally inviting the kids. So we need to do way different. We need to start treating this industry. I mean, we could probably learn some tips from Nickelodeon, right? We could probably learn some tips from the Kids' Choice Awards. We could probably learn how to put on events for kids that adults can also go to because there's like the adult like musicians, but we need to start viewing these events as kids events. And I know it sucks because I'm a man in his 30s that loves video games. I love esports, right? I love attending Smash Brothers tournaments. Maybe it's because I don't know. I love going to these events partially because it's so friendly and so open. You can meet anyone. Part of one of my favorite things to do is to see a group of kids and maybe teach them something about the game or maybe help them get better. Like I actually like kids. It breaks my heart that something, because I've been competing ever since I was like 13, right? I was one of those kids. So I see the benefits of being able to be around like safe adults. Oh my gosh, my Smash Brothers Melee game went up incredibly when I started playing with adults, right? I was like this 12-year-old little kid, and all of a sudden I started going to like tournaments. So I know that that's always going to happen. But I just think that it's up to the tournament organizers. It's up to the tournament organizers. It's definitely up to the casters. I am so sick of casters trying to downplay their importance within the fighting game community. Like I get it, you were just a pop monster once. I get it, you were just some kid from the arcade. You're not anymore. You're getting paid to be at these events. Literally, you are the face of Nintendo when it comes to man. Don't even get me started on Nairo. What a disappointment, right? The guy not only. Oh, sorry about that. I'm not
all good?
sure if like you can hear that, but I guess what I'm really trying to say is like adults should take responsibility. The solution to this is not to tweet more angry things and ban more people. That's not it. Those are band-aids. You need to take as much responsibility as possible. Shoot, I'm already tied this into
Yeah,
the Black Lives Matter
it's the
movement.
same
Let's
thing.
also tie it into the coronavirus and how the US has approached this, right? It is better to overreact than underreact. And that is one of the biggest takeaways that we've learned from how the US has handled this. We underreacted, we downplayed it. Turns out that's horrible. I want the esports and the fighting community to learn from that. Let's overreact about this. Let's make an overreaction. Let's demand that we see someone's ID before we even, and you know what? Maybe if someone is below 18, they have a very special wrist thing that's like bright red and bright pink. So it helps people call out when you keep talking to these kids, right? Or maybe in order to even enter the tournament, maybe you need to wear a special little thing that says, I'm underaged, or, kid or teen, like something to help people call this out. We need to just radically restructure the way we do this. And I'm all for overreactions. I'm all for taking more responsibility at the most practical levels. And yeah, there's so much more to be said about it. And here's something, I'll get off my soapbox, and I want to personally thank all of the people who have DM'd me asking how they can help and asking what they can do to try to change things. Because I've been very, vocal in the past week about esports leadership and what we got to do. And I've been very vocal about a mentorship and how important it is for the people who have experience in this industry to pass it on. So I just want to give a huge thanks to everyone who have reached out. I truly do believe that, I really hate this phrase, but I'm not going to say it. I do believe the adults in the room can do something about this. And it starts at the infrastructure level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is a good segue into, what can we do in the future? I think we are in a kind of an odd spot as well. I think we as reporters, we have a tough job looking at accusations and looking at what is our job here right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think your point earlier is very real, that our job should always be to call these things out when we see them and to not let them happen as often as they do. But like right now, we see an accusation and it's like, I'm not a judge. I don't have a jury. I don't have I'm not talking to these people. I'm not hearing both sides. Oh, now I've heard another side. Well, now I've heard another side to the other side. And now there's a third party getting involved. And
So there's one thing I'll say is that Twitter is not real life. I love saying that because a lot of people talk about like Twitter cancellations. Like, sure, fine, whatever. Yeah, I love people getting canceled off social media because why not? Like, what good is there to have these what are like essentially giant social communities if we can't kick people out of the social communities when they mess up? So one, if you want to help, know that Twitter isn't real life. Canceling someone off Twitter doesn't really do much to fixing this problem. The counter to that is do something in real life. So if you're going to put on a tournament, do something real life, in person, boots on the ground that makes that place safer. If you're going to have a party, do something in real life, like boots on the ground to make that thing safer. I really think people need to get offline much more than they do when it comes to changing things, right? If you hate the way that Smash Brothers tournaments encourage this, well, fine, start your own tournament, or reach out to a tournament organizer and propose this, or say, listen, I can get together a group of people who would love to, check IDs at the door, right? We need to start doing things in real life. I'm all for the Twitter mob and all that, and we can talk about cancel culture some other day, but if the worst thing that happens is these people get driven off social media, then we may have just done them a favor. Shoot, I wish I could be off social media forever, right? I think what needs to happen is we need to reclaim these tournaments. We need to reclaim these events. If we don't want this stuff to happen again, well, fine. Let's just make sure it doesn't happen again. And that comes with real things, real vetted, and that's probably going to involve these tournaments probably making less money. You're probably going to have to pay security. You're probably going to have to change the way in which you prioritize things. You're probably going to have to stop paying these commentators these inflated salaries and appearance fees, because turns out they're a huge part of the problem, right? You're just going to need to look at the drawing board all over again, restart it, refresh, and this time your goals are different. Say, for example, like before all this happened, right? When you're trying to create a Smash Bros. Tournament, your goal is, I want as many signups as possible. I want as many Twitch viewers as possible. That's it. Well, now that's changed. Your goals need to be, I want this to be as safe as possible for kids. I want everyone to feel like they're not being abused, groomed, and I want to make this a place where that is anti-groomer. I want to make it a safe space, and then I want to have Twitch viewers, and then I want to have, right? You just need to change your priorities, and it starts with the adults that put on these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Our priorities need to be a little different.
Yeah. I mean, it's capitalism, right? This is what happens when all you care about is Twitch views and dollar signs, and right? It's a mad dash towards greed, and there's a lot of collateral damage.
Mm-hmm. I do think, the other interesting position that we are in is what happened earlier this week. We had a panel, and the next day, someone on this panel was accused multiple times.
And we had multiple people that we had to kick out from panels. It wasn't just D1. Thankfully it was before the event, so we could not give them the platform. But the D1 case is very, very disappointing.
I spoke with Amanda last week, and we spoke about all the great things that she's done in the past months, and how much money she was raising, and the awareness that she was bringing through consultancy work with teams like Cloud9, and how she's worked very hard over however many years to get to this point, and things are coming together. But then I just read a post of hers recently, since then, talking about, because she's very involved in the fighting game community, so this is hitting her especially hard.
She's been in the FGC forever.
And she made this point about, I gave this guy a platform, I gave this guy a platform, I gave this girl a platform, I gave this person. And, I just talked to them last week. I just talked to them last month. I just did whatever really cool project with them. What does it mean? Like, do I take it down? Like, do we remove the panel we did with D1 because it's inconsistent with what literally came out the next day? He's preaching about safe space, but you're not a safe person. Like, we're in this weird spot where, like, we have to vet better as well, maybe. I don't know. It's very interesting. And I agree. I think the system needs to change. And I think if the system changes, then things may be easier and more clear in the future. But right now, we are living with this.
So I would like to say, first of all, I think people are always trying to vet, right? Like, people are always trying to suss out if someone is good or bad or suspicious, or if they have ill intention. This is just human nature, especially when you're trying to work with people. The thing about D1 is that you could have tried to vet, you could have spent weeks trying to vet D1, and the only thing you would have got was positive praise from everyone. The only thing you would have got was, oh yeah, he's done so much. And the thing is, the sad fact is he has done so much. The sad fact is he has promoted Smash Brothers probably more than anyone. He has literally put the game on the map to so many people. It only makes his failings more disappointing. Yeah. Now, I'm personally of the belief, like, Louis C.K. is still funny. He's a creep, and what he did was wrong, and I don't believe people should support him, and I think there needs to be action, and there needs to be consequences, but you can't try to undo the fact that he's funny. He is objectively funny, and I think the same thing that happens with D1. Personally, yeah, we're going to get rid of that panel. It sucks because I think it was a great panel, but there needs to be consequences. There needs to be a very clear line in the sand that says this is a professional industry, and when you do these things, you don't work in this industry anymore. Now, the problem is, before, I don't know, esports, was a thing in maybe 2015, could you even say that Smash Brothers was an industry? No, it was an in-group of very popular people having parties and having fun based around a really, really awesome game. That was it. And that is what I think we're learning more and more. I think we're learning more and more that we need to start treating this, and I think people need to start treating influencers if you're trying to become more than just a streamer and you're trying to like represent things, you need to be held accountable, right? If D1 was just a streamer, then he has the right to his fan base. People can still like D1 if they want to, right? For example, I love watching the combo contest. I love watching the Smash Brothers combo contest every year at SmashCon. Literally, sometimes for fun, I would watch the ones back in 2015 and in 2014, right? Are all of a sudden those videos not amazing, awesome displays of esports talent and creativity just because one person who was commentating during it made a series of horrible, evil, manipulative decisions and abused their power? Well, no, I still think those events are great. But now is when we start having to put that line in the sand now. We have learned this about him now. We know it about them now. And I hope, if any, when we take these hard lines in the sand, it does two things. It, A, makes people think twice when they're about to do something morally reprehensible and illegal. It makes people think twice because there's consequences, right? That's a thing. Like, people don't do things because consequences are there. So I hope the esports industry makes it very clear there's consequences for this. And two, I hope that it helps victims know that when they come out, we will support them. Yeah. When a victim comes out, the industry will hear you. I don't want to give support or backup or defend. And you know what? You see people defending D1, but what they're really doing is defending themselves. Yeah. They're defending their hobby. They're defending their love, their passion. They're defending their ability to enjoy Smash Brothers like they used to. Yep. And it's ultimately selfish, and I hope people can start seeing that. It's easier to say, oh, well, whatever, it's fine. Because you know what? The same thing's happening with Zero. You know, a Zero, the Smash player, the same accusations, style of accusations are coming out. The guy was grooming a young girl through chat, and she was like 15 or something. It's just absurd, right? I'm okay with losing some of the top figures, actually the top figures in the Smash Bros. Community, if it helps someone being groomed. No, wait a minute. I think I'm being groomed. I think I should say something. This isn't right. Because maybe they will think, wait a minute, you're doing the same thing that Zero did. Or you're doing the same thing that D1 did. You know, this is bad. That's where I fall on it. So, you know, I don't like to be like, to rewrite history, right? I'm still going to say that, yeah, D1 contributed amazingly to the scene. You can't undo that. But he also is like responsible for the scene's biggest like negative blight ever. He's also responsible for possibly the death of the Smash Bros. Competitive scene as we know it. So there's that.
Definitely a downside.
Yeah.
We are over an hour at this point. I do want to make one more point as well, and you alluded to this. I do think, you know, it is weird, like, what our job is in this situation. Obviously, it is a gray area. However, I think it is important for us, but also for everyone on Twitter, all these fans, all of the other people that are in the scene with power or without, that you don't police the stories that are being told, that you don't compare them, that you don't say, this isn't really relevant, or but like, this isn't that bad, or this is really bad, we need to talk about this only and not talk about XYZ else, because all that does is further contribute to it. People might be talking about situation. There was a very helpful metaphor that I read about a week ago, that this whole thing is a pyramid. And, you know, there are all these building blocks. It's like playing with Legos. Like, you can't get the pieces at the top if you don't have the piece at the bottom. This is all supported by various problems, structural problems in the industry. And I made the point that one of them is just sexism in games. You just hop on. You were talking about it
Huge.
earlier. If you are in a game and you don't call out someone else being
Yep.
sexist, even if you're not sexist, then you're building this pyramid by yourself.
I'd go as far as say that's at the very bottom. That's the base in which all of this lives on. Because, you know, if gaming was a place that inherently respected women, then I would hope that even, I'm not going to say that if gaming was a space that respected women more, I think it would be easier for the cowardly men to come out and say something.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there are more people that go along with it or stay silent because so many people don't like to go against the grain.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the grain needs to be changed.
Yeah.
It needs to become normalized and popular and acceptable to call out a misogyny when you see it.
In any form. And it doesn't matter
Any
how
form,
big
yeah.
or small or what it looks like.
Yeah, because like even something small, it's just going to lead to something big. Like, you know, like, do you think these grooming situations happen overnight? No, they don't happen overnight. That's the point. If you let one little thing slide, oh, well, come on, he was just chatting with her. Yeah, just chatting with a 15-year-old. What do you think it's going to lead to? What do you think their intentions are? Just because they got caught, you know, like before they did anything horrible, doesn't mean that, oh, okay, you're safe. We can still like you now. No, it's all the same problem.
And if it's just chatting, then cool, stop. If that's all it was, then it doesn't really matter then. Cool, all right, then it's done. Then stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, I've a number of responses I've seen to various stories are, oh, this, like, why would you post that? Or like, does this matter? Or like, not as relevant. I just think that's very dangerous because people are already questioning. If it's been however many years, it's been however many times, it's been however many nights of sitting there frustrated, you know, trying to compare or trying to relive and see if it's even worth talking about, especially now because this has been going on for weeks. So people talking right now are people who have been struggling even more over the last few weeks and have finally hit the threshold where they're like, my internal like bouncing just in my head isn't doing it anymore. And they've now reached this point. It doesn't matter what level of sexual abuse or harassment or assault or whatever it is. Yeah. If they are reporting on something or finally willing to speak up, then they are, and it doesn't matter because it's not you, it's not your life. And I just think it harms other people who are having the same struggles and wanting to speak up more if we just say, oh, this one isn't as important. Once you take away that, because it's just another power thing.
So Parkes, you're totally right. I always think it's a valuable thing to unpack why people do things, because I think if you can unpack why people do things, then you can kind of start looking inward to be like, oh, well, I don't want to be motivated by that because, you know, this is about morals and ethics. We can't ignore that there is a sizable group of people who view this as entertainment. Like, at the end of the day, there is a sizable amount of people who are like treating all of this as gossip, and they're like reading it, and that causes them to then criticize these people's stories because it's not as juicy.
Yeah.
Or, oh, come on, like this is nothing. Like, you know, come on, like, look at this person. He did this, this, and this. And I think in that same vein, you know, you need to be aware that when someone is criticizing this abuser, if someone is criticizing a victim's story, they're doing it because internally this story isn't somehow a threat to them. Mm-hmm. It's either a threat to them because it makes them realize, I only care about this if it's really seedy and really horrible, right? Or two, this is one of my favorite players, so the only way I will not support him is if it's the worst thing in the world, right? Or what I also hate too is people are criticizing these stories for how they're written, as if writing isn't hard enough on its own, as if writing something that is compelling and interesting isn't hard enough, but now you have to write something that A, is compelling enough that the internet likes you, 2, has to reach the right tone and the right balance so people don't criticize you, and also I'm writing about the hardest thing that's ever happened to you in your life, right? So once you start to realize this, you start to see the criticism for what it is. All of it is just like self-defense, people being selfish, people trying to defend their own egos, and people trying to make sense of all this, people trying to protect their own view of esports and Smash Brothers. And you know what? Maybe it's because I'm an adult. I don't really care about the realities of where we are now, because I know there's work to be done to make it better. So I'm not sitting there, I'm criticizing people's stories or nitpicking them or trying to see if it's, like true or not. That's not what the point is, right? Let's truly see how bad this is, accept how bad it is, believe these stories, and okay. And as I just say that, I immediately hear the counter argument. Well, there are some false allegations, and we have to do that. Okay, yeah, sure, great. If someone is falsely accused, which did happen, that was, God, I forgot his name. It was her name was.
It was Legos and Jasmina.
Yes. So there are the Jasminas of the world. So yes, great. We need to apply that due diligence, but there also needs to be a point. The reason people were calling out Jasmina is because the other side came and brought substantial evidence that proved his innocence, right? That's not what we're seeing when these stories get picked apart. We're just seeing people not liking their word choice, or we're just seeing people saying, oh, you're just doing this for attention. Why would anyone want this type of attention? Why would anyone want this type of attention? When someone says you're just doing it for attention, all it does is reveal their own obsession with clout, that they truly think the only reason people do anything online is to get followers. Mm-hmm. It's just also so gross. But I'm glad we're talking about it, Parks. These are the type of frank and way longer than we planned conversations that need to happen.
30 minutes, an hour and a half,
hey, it's all
somewhere in there. But yeah, I do think, that's probably good.
Yeah, we're good. I mean, we have to end this someday.
Yeah. It's a bummer. And I imagine this is going to continue being a topic. I don't know. I mean, like when the TSM situation happened, I think I talked about that 4 weeks in a row. This, like, I imagine this could be the same. I imagine we're gonna. Yeah, I think until we get some systematic changes, then it's still going to keep happening. It'll still be relevant.
And also, like, you're naive to think this is just a problem with esports and gaming. If you want to really blow your mind and have a really sad 4th of July, just look up YouTube families and YouTube family channels and look at the rampant child abuse and the absolute horrible conditions that YouTube's most popular families actually place their kids in. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I think this is a huge problem with just the internet and people in general. I think we can go back to Nick's point. You have to bury your idols and all that. But, this isn't something that's just related to esports and gaming. Yeah. This Me Too movement started in Hollywood, and I truly do think it's going to hit every community, like, eventually. Mm-hmm. Because this is a widespread, massive problem when it comes to sexual assault and the dehumanization of women. It's not just something that happens in Hollywood. It's not just something that happens in gaming. I bet you could find any stupid niche community. I bet it happens in the yoga community. I bet there's this huge yoga community of people online, and all they do, and I'm sure there's all these like celebrity yoga-ers, and I bet the same things happen. And I bet eventually the same courage and strength that these victims have to like reveal it is going to happen in those communities too. Actually, one of the points, and I swear this is the last point that I'll make. One of the points that I've often made is that Twitch and Twitter and gaming, we're so ahead of the curve when it comes to a lot of this like social media and a lot of this digital media that it doesn't surprise me that the Me Too movement is happening here kind of like first, or not first, but it's happening here so rapidly and so big. And I think it's because we have an understanding of these social platforms, and when we have an understanding of this more so than other communities. And I think part of what empowered these victims to come out is because they knew people would listen. There are thousands and thousands of other victims who don't have the Twitter platforms. They don't have the their abuser isn't an influencer. Their abuser is just their boss at their shitty company, right? So, there is something to be said about that. So maybe if you are listening and gaming is just your hobby, well, there's probably places in your real life that you can be a better ally towards women. There's probably, even when you go to your local bar or you go to your 4th of July barbecue, if you want to have one, right? There's probably ways in which you can try to stamp this out too. So don't be mistaken in thinking this is just an influencer problem. It's not. The whole banality of human depravity is that it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And to try to be enlightened is to try to fight this wherever it shines. Whether it at the toppest level of Smash Brothers fame, or just that one shitty guy at the bar who's always harassing women and you don't do anything about it because you're a good guy.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, we talked about it in the last couple episodes. I mean, Valorant sexism, and that was Sue Collins was on here, and she just said the exact thing. Like, please, like, if you are a good guy, just help. Like, just help.
Help us. Yep.
Just speak
help
up.
It out.
It'll make a world of difference. If enough people do that, we remove one of the blocks from the bottom of the pyramid, and we make the whole thing less stable. We make it harder to build in the future.
Yeah.
It's just, and then we could take that block and put it somewhere else in the new system that hopefully we end up building.
Did you know the Egyptians used a circle for all of their measurements when building the pyramids?
I did not.
That's why everything is so like uniform, and you can find pi, and you can find all of these really beautiful 90 degree angles and all of this like symmetry within the pyramids. That was completely random and had nothing to say, but now you know what, this has been a rough conversation, so
yeah, just
look up a good Egyptian documentary on YouTube. That's a fun way to learn.
Sounds good. Yeah, and don't look at the
good
YouTube
way
families.
To end the show, Nick. You did it again, man. You're so good.
Don't look at the YouTube families. Look at the Egyptian documentaries instead.
Yeah.
Go watch Planet Earth or something.
Planet Earth.
Go watch March of the Penguins.
I mean, Parkes, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Episode 6.
Episode 6. We're starting to get up there.
Can I be on every 6th episode? So can I be on episode 12?
Probably. I'll run out of guests by then. I'll get you back on here.
Episode 18.
Yeah.
Nice.
That sounds good.
Cool.
We'll come up with the clever name. Thank you so much. For all of you watching, thank you so much. We are here weekly, as the name suggests. This is Invent Global, sponsored by HyperX. Thank you so much, HyperX, for helping us out.
Thanks, HyperX.
But yeah, we will catch you next week. Hopefully we'll have some more positive news. But maybe we won't. But yeah. Please go be good people. We'll catch you next time.
Be good.